We begin a very long time ago, further back than any written record can reach, further back than any city, any farm, any road. We begin in a time before all of those things, a time when the world was entirely wild, when forests stretched without end, when rivers ran without dams or bridges, when the only sounds at night were wind and water and animals. This is where the human story begins, not with kings or soldiers or merchants, but with small groups of people, moving slowly across an open landscape, looking for food, looking for shelter, responding to the world around them one day at a time. The earliest human ancestors lived in Africa. This is where the evidence points. The oldest fossils of human relatives have been found in eastern and southern Africa, in places like Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, and South Africa. The landscape of eastern Africa includes open grasslands, called savannas. These are wide, flat areas of grass and scattered trees. The sky is very large there. The horizon is far away, and across that landscape small groups of early humans lived their lives. We need to go back a very long time to understand this story fully, perhaps 2 million years or more. The creatures living then were not quite like modern humans. They walked upright as we do, but their brains were smaller. Their faces were shaped differently. Their hands, though, were capable. They could grip and hold and manipulate objects. And that ability, that capable, flexible hand, is part of what makes this story possible. Scientists call one early group Homo habilis. The name means something like handyman or skillful person. This group lived roughly 2 million years ago. They are among the earliest members of the genus Homo, the group that eventually includes us. They were small, perhaps 4 feet tall. Their brains were larger than those of earlier primates, but smaller than ours. What makes Homo habilis notable is the evidence of stone tools found alongside their fossils. These are simple tools. A stone that has been struck against another stone, knocking off a sharp flake. The resulting flake can cut. The remaining stone can batter and break. These are the earliest known tools made by human hands. They are sometimes called Olduvai tools, named after Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, where many were found. Olduvai Gorge is a long, deep cut in the earth. Over millions of years, layers of ancient soil and ash have built up there. And within those layers, fossils and tools were preserved. Scientists have excavated carefully in this place, layer by layer, each layer a different moment in deep time. What they found there helped build our understanding of where we came from. The tools from this early period are not elegant. They are rough and irregular, but they are tools. They show planning. They show that a mind looked at a stone and saw something that could be made, something that could be used. That is a significant step. It is the beginning of technology. These early humans lived in small groups. We believe this because the evidence of large settlements does not exist from this period. The footprints are small, metaphorically speaking. A few individuals moving together, sharing food perhaps, caring for young, responding together to dangers. The savanna is not a gentle place. There are large predators, lions, leopards, hyenas, wild dogs. Early humans were not at the top of this food chain. They were in the middle of it. They needed to be watchful. They moved in groups partly for safety. More eyes watching. More hands ready. Food in this early period came from many sources. Plants, fruits, tubers, seeds, leaves, insects, eggs found in nests, and meat gathered from animals that had already been killed by predators or perhaps hunted opportunistically. Early humans were not yet the sophisticated hunters that later groups would become. But they were resourceful. They used those simple stone tools to cut flesh from bone, to crack bone and reach the marrow inside. Marrow is rich in fat and calories. It is a valuable food, and early humans learned to access it. The daily life of these early groups was organized around finding food. This is the central task. Everything else follows from it. A group might wake at dawn. They move through the landscape, spreading out a little to cover more ground. They watch the trees for fruit. They dig at the earth for roots and tubers. They listen and observe, always. When the day grows hot, they may rest in shade. In the afternoon, more movement, more searching. In the evening, they come together again. They settle somewhere safe, perhaps in the branches of a large tree, perhaps near a rock face that provides shelter on one side. And they rest. This daily rhythm, moving, searching, finding, resting, is the basic pattern. It will continue with variations for a very long time. For hundreds of thousands of years, the fundamental shape of human life is this rhythm. Movement and rest, searching and finding. Time passes, a great deal of time. By about 1.8 million years ago, a new group emerges in the fossil record. This group is called Homo erectus, upright human. They are taller than Homo habilis, more similar to modern humans in their body shape. Their legs are long. Their hips are structured for efficient walking. They can travel long distances on foot without tiring as quickly. Homo erectus is a remarkable group. They survive for an extraordinarily long time, from roughly 1.8 million years ago to perhaps 100,000 years ago, or even later in some regions. That is a span of time almost impossible to comprehend. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, have existed for perhaps 300,000 years. Homo erectus existed for much longer. One of the most important developments associated with Homo erectus is the hand axe. This is a more sophisticated tool than the simple flakes of earlier periods. A hand axe is shaped on both sides. It is worked carefully, flake by flake, into a roughly oval or teardrop shape. It is heavier and more versatile than earlier tools. It can be used for cutting, scraping, and pounding. It fits in the hand with a kind of natural comfort. The making of a hand axe requires planning. It requires holding a goal in mind, the final shape, while working toward it step by step. Hand axes are found across a vast geographic range. In Africa, in Europe, in South Asia. This tells us something important. Homo erectus traveled. They were the first human relatives to spread beyond Africa in significant numbers. They moved into the Middle East, into Central Asia, into what is now China and Southeast Asia. They crossed the ancient landscapes of Eurasia over tens of thousands of years. Slowly, one generation's range slightly wider than the last. This movement is not a march or a migration in any organized sense. It is the natural consequence of small groups expanding their range over generations. A group lives in one place for a season, then they move a little, and their children grow up in the new place, and their children move a little further. Over thousands of years, this slow drift carries a population across a continent. Homo erectus is also associated with the early use of fire. The evidence for this is debated among scientists. Some sites show evidence of controlled fire from perhaps 1 million years ago or more. Other evidence is more recent. But the association between Homo erectus and fire is strong in the archaeological record. Fire changes everything, provides warmth, provides light in the darkness. It changes the social environment of a group. A fire at the center of a camp creates a gathering place. People sit around it. They are together in the light. The darkness is held back. Fire also changes food. Cooking makes many foods easier to digest. It breaks down tough plant fibers, kills parasites in meat. Cooked food provides more energy per mouthful than raw food. This may have supported larger, more complex brains. The campfire, even in this ancient period, is a social space. We can imagine carefully, without inventing, that people sitting around a fire at night are not entirely silent. Sounds pass between them, gestures, expressions, the beginnings of communication that would eventually become language. We do not know exactly when language began, but the social conditions for it, shared attention, cooperation, living in groups, are present in this period. We move forward in time again, slowly, always slowly. By perhaps 300,000 years ago, new groups appear in the fossil record. In Africa, the ancestors of modern humans are taking shape. In Europe and Western Asia, a group called the Neanderthals is developing. Neanderthals are sometimes thought of as primitive or simple, but the evidence does not support that view. They were capable and adaptable. They lived through ice ages. They made tools. They hunted large animals. They cared for their injured and their elderly. Some of their members lived long lives despite serious injuries, which means others must have helped them. Neanderthals were stocky and strong. Their bodies were built for cold climates. Wide rib cages, powerful limbs, large noses that may have helped warm cold air before it reached the lungs. They lived in caves and rock shelters when available. In open areas, they may have built simple windbreaks from branches and stone. Their tools were more sophisticated than those of earlier periods. A technique called levallois, named after a place in France where examples were found, allowed Neanderthals to prepare a stone core in advance and then strike off a flake of predetermined shape. This shows forward planning. It shows a mind that can think several steps ahead. Neanderthals hunted. They hunted large animals, mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, horses, deer, bison. These were dangerous animals. The hunting required cooperation, groups working together to drive animals toward a cliff, or into a bog, or to surround them. This kind of coordinated hunting implies communication. Not necessarily language as we know it, but some shared system of meaning, signals perhaps, gestures, sounds that carried specific information. In Europe, the climate during Neanderthal times was often very cold. Ice ages came and went. During cold periods, glaciers advanced. Forests retreated. The landscape became more open. Herds of large animals grazed on wide, cold plains, and Neanderthals followed those herds. They knew the migrations. They knew where to find animals at different times of year. This is a form of knowledge accumulated and shared across generations. There is evidence that Neanderthals used pigments. Ochre, a reddish iron-rich mineral, has been found at some Neanderthal sites. What they used it for is not certain. It may have been for decorating the body. It may have had other purposes. But the presence of pigment suggests an interest in color, in appearance, in something beyond pure survival. There is also evidence that Neanderthals buried their dead. At a site in Iraq called Shanidar Cave, a Neanderthal skeleton was found. Early analysis suggested flower pollen was found nearby, which some interpreted as evidence of flowers placed at burial. Later studies have raised questions about this interpretation. but burial itself, intentionally placing the dead in the ground, is found at other Neanderthal sites. This is significant. It suggests awareness of death, and perhaps some response to it that goes beyond the practical. Meanwhile, in Africa, the lineage that will become modern humans is developing. Fossils found in Morocco at a site called Jebel Irhoud date to around 300,000 years ago. They show features that are recognizably like those of modern humans, though with some differences. The face is modern in many respects. The brain case is slightly more elongated than ours. These were early members of our species, or very close to it. By perhaps 200,000 years ago, Homo sapiens, our own species, is present in Africa. They live in small groups as earlier humans did. They gather food. They make tools. They use fire. They live within the rhythms of the natural world. The tools that modern humans make are more varied and refined than those of earlier periods. Blades, long, thin flakes struck from a carefully prepared core, become more common. These can be made into knives, scrapers, and points. They are sharper and more precise than earlier tools. And they can be hafted, attached to handles of wood or bone. A stone point on a wooden shaft becomes a spear. A blade set in a groove of bone becomes a knife with a handle. These compound tools made of more than one material, represent a new level of complexity. Modern humans in Africa during this period are not all living in one place. The continent is vast. Different groups live in different environments. Some live near rivers and lakes. Some live in forests. Some live on coastal areas, where shellfish and fish supplement other foods. The coastal groups leave behind shell middens, accumulated piles of discarded shells that mark where people repeatedly gathered and ate. These middens are preserved in some coastal areas of southern Africa. They are quiet archives of ancient meals. The evidence from southern African sites like Blombo's cave is particularly rich. At Blombo's, archaeologists have found engraved pieces of ochre, simple geometric patterns scratched into the surface. These are among the oldest known examples of deliberate marking, of making a pattern for its own sake. There are also shell beads found at the site, small shells with holes in them, perhaps threaded on a string. These objects suggest decoration. They suggest that people were thinking about appearance, about symbols, about things that carry meaning beyond function. This kind of behavior, making marks, making decorations, creating things that carry symbolic meaning, is part of what archaeologists call behavioral modernity. It shows a mind that thinks in symbols, a mind that can hold abstract ideas, that can represent one thing with another. This capacity for symbolic thought is one of the things that distinguish modern humans. And it appears in the archaeological record in Africa in these early periods, before modern humans spread to other continents. At some point, modern humans begin to move beyond Africa. The timing of this movement is studied carefully. There may have been multiple dispersals at different times, but by around 60 to 70,000 years ago, groups of modern humans are moving into the Middle East. And from there, over many generations, into Asia, Europe, and eventually the rest of the world. They move slowly, as all movement in this period is slow. A generation might extend a group's range by a small amount. The next generation moves a little further. Over thousands of years, this carries people across continents. As modern humans spread, they encounter other groups. In the Middle East and Europe, they encounter Neanderthals. There is evidence that the two groups interbred. We know this because modern humans outside Africa carry a small percentage of Neanderthal DNA. A few percent in most cases. This is the genetic trace of encounters between these two groups long ago. The Neanderthals disappear from the fossil record by around 40,000 years ago. The reasons are debated. Competition with modern humans may be part of the explanation. Climate change may also have played a role. The end of Neanderthals is not fully understood. But by 40,000 years ago, modern humans are the only members of the genus Homo remaining in Europe and Western Asia. In Europe, the period from roughly 40,000 to 12,000 years ago is called the Upper Paleolithic. It is a time of remarkable cultural development. The cave paintings of southern France and northern Spain come from this period. Places like Lascaux, Chauvet, and Altamira. These are painted deep inside cave systems. Animals fill the walls. Horses, bison, mammoths, deer, rhinoceroses, bears, lions. They are painted with skill and observation. The animals are shown in movement, in different positions, sometimes overlapping layer upon layer. The people who made these paintings used pigments made from ochre and manganese. They used animal fat as a medium. They used brushes made of hair or plant fibers. They used their hands, pressing them against the wall and blowing pigment around them, leaving hand outlines. Some of those hand outlines belong to children, small hands pressed against the stone. And then, around them, the ochre dust settles, and the hand is recorded. We do not know exactly why the paintings were made. We do not know what they meant to the people who created them. Various ideas have been put forward. Some scholars think they may have been connected to ritual or ceremony. Others suggest they may have served as records of the animals important to the group. Others think the deep caves may have been places of special significance. We honestly do not know, but the paintings exist, and they show minds fully capable of art, fully capable of representation and imagination. The people of this period in Europe are sometimes called Cro-Magnons. This is an older term, named after a rock shelter in France where fossils were found. They are anatomically modern humans. They look like us. They think like us in essential ways. Their brains are the same size. Their capacity for language, for planning, for symbolic thought, all the same. What separates us from them is not biology. It is accumulated knowledge. It is the things that have been learned, built, and recorded in the tens of thousands of years since. These people of the Upper Paleolithic also made objects from bone and ivory. Needles, thin and sharp, with small holes for thread. These needles tell us that they sewed. They made fitted clothing. In the cold European climate, fitted clothing, clothing that conforms to the body and traps warmth, is essential. Without it, surviving a European winter in the Ice Age is very difficult. The needle is a small object, but it is a significant technology. It made the far north habitable. They also carved small figurines. Some are animals. Some are human figures. Among the most famous are the so-called Venus figurines, small carved figures with emphasized female forms. These have been found across a wide area of Europe, from France to Russia. What they represented to the people who made them is not known. But they were clearly made with intention, with care. They were carried, perhaps, as meaningful objects. Music was also part of this world. Flutes made from bird bone and mammoth ivory have been found in Germany, dating to around 40,000 years ago. These are the oldest known musical instruments. They were found at sites associated with early modern humans in Europe. A bone flute is not a simple object. It requires careful drilling of precisely placed holes. It requires an understanding of sound. It requires someone who listens to the world and wants to create something that makes a sound of its own. Life in the Upper Paleolithic is still organized around movement. Groups follow the migrations of animals. In summer, they range more widely. In winter, they find more sheltered places. Caves and rock overhangs provide protection from wind and snow. A fire near the entrance of a cave warms the space within. Smoke drifts out through the opening. The group gathers close. Food is more varied now. The tools are more effective. Spears with well-crafted points allow more efficient hunting. Fish are caught. Birds are taken. Plant foods are still important: tubers, seeds, nuts, berries in their seasons. A group that knows its landscape well knows where to find food at every time of year. This knowledge is passed down. Learned, not instinctive. Taught by older members to younger ones. The social group in this period is typically small, perhaps 20 to 50 people in a band. These bands are not isolated. They encounter other bands. They trade. Exchange of shells, stones, and other materials across long distances is documented in the archaeological record. Materials from far away turn up at sites where they do not naturally occur. Someone carried them, or they were passed from group to group. Either way, connection existed. These connections between groups are important. They allow for the sharing of ideas. A new tool technique developed in one place can spread to neighboring groups. Information about distant resources can travel between bands. And marriages between groups help maintain those connections. In small population societies, marrying outside the immediate group helps avoid the problems that come from too close relatedness. These social networks, loose and wide, are part of the foundation of human culture. We move forward again. To roughly 12,000 years ago, the climate is changing. The last great ice age is coming to an end. Glaciers are retreating northward. Temperatures are rising, slowly. Forests are expanding. The open grasslands of the Ice Age are giving way to woodland. And the great herds of large animals, the mammoths, the woolly rhinoceroses, the giant deer, are declining. Some will become extinct. The world is transforming. This change in climate brings change in how people live. As the large herd animals decline, some groups place more emphasis on plant foods, on smaller game, on fish and shellfish. This period, after the Ice Age and before the development of farming, is sometimes called the Mesolithic, the Middle Stone Age. Groups in this period are often somewhat more settled than their predecessors. In places with abundant resources, a rich river, a productive coastline, a group might stay in one place for much of the year. The dog appears in human life during or before this period. The domestication of dogs from wolves is a remarkable development. The timeline is still studied, but by at least 15,000 years ago, and possibly earlier, dogs were living alongside humans. Not as livestock, as companions, as working partners. Dogs can help in hunting. They can warn of approaching predators. They can pull loads in some conditions. The relationship between humans and dogs is old. Old enough to be considered one of the fundamental partnerships in the human story. In different parts of the world, during this broad period, something new begins to happen. People begin to manage the plants they rely on. They begin to tend them, to encourage some and discourage others, to save seeds and plant them. This is the beginning of agriculture. Agriculture develops independently in several different places. In the Middle East, wheat and barley are among the first cultivated crops. In China, rice and millet. In parts of the Americas, maize and squash and beans. In Africa, sorghum and other crops. These are separate developments, arising from similar conditions. Groups that have been relying heavily on certain plants begin to take a more active role in their growth. In the Middle East, the region sometimes called the Fertile Crescent, the transition begins around 12,000 years ago. This region includes parts of what are now Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Israel, and neighboring areas. The landscape here has wild grasses, the ancestors of wheat and barley. These wild plants produce seeds that can be harvested and eaten. People have been harvesting them for a long time. The shift comes when they begin to plant those seeds deliberately, to return to the same place season after season, to tend the growing plants. This shift is gradual. It does not happen all at once. For many generations, groups in this region are somewhere between full foraging and full farming. They move seasonally. They harvest wild plants. They tend some gardens. They hunt. They keep some animals. The transition takes thousands of years. The keeping of animals, animal domestication, is part of the same general transition. Sheep and goats are among the first domesticated animals in the Middle East. Cattle follow. Pigs. Each of these species is brought into a closer, managed relationship with humans over many generations. Wild animals gradually become domestic ones. The process is slow. Each generation of animals born in proximity to humans is a little more accustomed to that proximity. Over many generations, the animals change. They become smaller in some cases. Their temperaments change. They become domestic. With farming and herding, life changes profoundly. Groups that farm must stay near their fields. They must plant, tend, and harvest in the same place. This means settlements, permanent or semi-permanent places where people live. The first villages appear in the Middle East around this time. Small clusters of houses, built from stone or mud brick. A few rooms, a hearth inside, storage space for grain. Grain storage is important. A stored supply of grain allows a group to survive through seasons when fresh food is scarce. A good harvest, properly stored, can feed a community through winter and spring. This stability, the ability to store food, allows populations to grow. More food supports more people. More people can tend more fields. The cycle builds on itself. The earliest known town in the world is often said to be Jericho, located near a spring in what is now the West Bank. There is evidence of settlement at Jericho dating back perhaps 11,000 years. It began as a small settlement, a place near water with wild plant resources nearby. Over generations, it became a more substantial place. Stone walls were built around it at some point. A stone tower, perhaps 9 meters tall, was constructed. This is the earliest known large stone construction in the world. Its exact purpose is not fully understood, but it shows organized, collective effort, people working together toward a shared goal. Another remarkable site from this early period is Göbekli Tepe, in what is now southeastern Turkey. It dates to roughly 11 to 12,000 years ago, before widespread farming. What was found there is extraordinary. Large stone pillars arranged in circles. The pillars are carved with images of animals: foxes, snakes, birds, aurochs. The site was clearly important. It required significant organized labor to build. Many people working together, but they were hunter-gatherers, not yet farmers. Göbekli Tepe suggests that the capacity for large-scale social organization, for coordinating many people toward a shared project, was present in humans before farming made it seem necessary. The mind was ready before the conditions demanded it. Life in early farming settlements is different from life in a mobile foraging band. It is also harder in some ways. The diet of early farmers is often narrower than that of foragers. Foragers eat many different plants and animals. Farmers rely heavily on a few crops. This specialization carries risk. If the harvest fails, there is less diversity to fall back on. The health evidence from early farming skeletons sometimes shows signs of nutritional stress. Shorter stature. Signs of iron deficiency. The beginning of farming is not simply an improvement. It is a trade. Greater food security in good years. Greater vulnerability in bad ones. And yet farming continues. Spreads. Groups that adopt it can support more people per unit of land. Over time, farming populations expand and farming practices spread. The foraging way of life does not disappear immediately. It continues in many regions for thousands of years. In some places, it continues into recent centuries. But slowly, across much of the world, the balance shifts. More people farm. Fewer people follow the old mobile patterns. The settlements grow. Villages become larger. Some become towns. The skills required for a settled life multiply. Pottery is developed, clay-shaped, and fired to make containers for storing and cooking. Weaving develops, thread made from plant fibers or animal wool, woven into cloth. Specialized work becomes possible. Not everyone needs to grow food when there is enough to share. Some people can focus on other things, on making pots, on weaving, on building, on the management of the community. And in this slow accumulation of change, the tools, the fire, the language, the art, the farming, the settlement, we can see the long path that leads from those early small groups on the African savanna to the villages and towns where a very different kind of human life begins to take shape. The story of primitive man is not a story of simple creatures slowly becoming complex ones. It is a story of capable, intelligent beings responding to a changing world, making the best use of what they had, learning from one another, passing knowledge forward, each generation inheriting what the last had discovered, and adding something of their own. The stone tools become more refined over thousands of years, not because humans become smarter, but because knowledge accumulates, because techniques are taught and learned and improved, because each generation starts from where the last one ended. The fire that is controlled and carried becomes something relied upon. The shelter that is built in one season teaches the next generation how to build better. The seed that is planted and tended shows over years which varieties grow best. Knowledge grows slowly, but it grows. And through all of it, the basic human needs remain the same. Food, warmth, safety, connection with others, care for children, response to illness and injury, the marking of the dead. These things are present from the earliest periods. They are present in the foraging bands of 2 million years ago, however simply expressed. They are present in the cave painting communities of 40,000 years ago. They are present in the first farming villages. And they are present now. We are the continuation of all of that. Our bones have the same basic structure. Our brains have the same essential organization. Our need for food, for warmth, for connection, these are as old as the genus we belong to. What has changed is the context, the accumulated layer of knowledge, technology, and social organization that surrounds us. But underneath all of that, the same creature, the same curious, social, tool-using, symbol-making animal, walking upright across the landscape, looking for what it needs. We slow down now. The narration comes gently to a close. Outside, the night is quiet. Somewhere very far away in time, a small group of people is sitting near a fire. The fire is low. The air is cool. The stars are above them, as they always have been. The children are sleeping. The adults are quiet. Tomorrow they will move again. Tomorrow there will be more searching, more finding. But now, in this moment, there is rest. And that has always been part of the story too. The rest at the end of the day. The quieting of the body. The closing of the eyes. The fire dying down to coals. And the long, still night,